So in the meantime, let's go ahead and yeah, let's get this concept up and running, this game, right? So again, the premise of this is that like users would have like a screen where they start, they kind of say like start game, and then they're given a choice between like, uh, uh, I'm not worried, Eric. It should all be good. Um, so okay, so given that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and so I don't know about you all, but I have like I like sort of like you have like code pens or like code sandboxes, these sort of like environments for you to play around in. I wanted a way to sort of version control that. Like it's nice to be able to like have a link for people to share for those things, but it's nice for I like having an actual like repo that I can track over time. So I have like a Vue 3 lab where I go ahead and basically do all my Vue stuff in here. So given that, let's see, I added a bunch of random stuff here. Let's see. Oh, right, I added a router. Let me just go ahead and commit this stuff. Got it. So let me see. Whoop. All right. All right, so what was I doing? That's right. So let me go ahead and into feed add router. Okay. So one of the things I've been doing a lot recently is to actually try to get even more familiar with VS Code. Like I already use a lot of its features, but I know that for the really advanced users, there's a lot of interesting things they do. So for example, you might have noticed like compared to like the VS Code, like one optimization that I've done recently is actually put my folder menu to the right. And which is kind of was kind of an interesting proposal for me when they first talked about it, because it's this idea that like if you think about it, when something's on the right, it doesn't change the code you're looking at, like it doesn't shift it basically like 300 pixels. But instead what you find that like it's just supposed to be something that's on the side that you look at temporarily, but then really you want to get rid of it. And so Caleb, I think it's Perizio, he came out with this like course called like Make VS Code Awesome. And so I've basically been kind of going through it. And so one of the things he also says is like to make the folder super big so that you can't ignore it. So here you can see that like this is kind of annoying, right? You want to be able to just focus on the code. And so in that regard, I kind of been making the editor a bit more minimal to sort of see how that feels. But on top of that, I've actually finally started using the terminal more often inside of VS Code. Part of what was giving me the hold up, because some people have asked in the videos, is that like why do I like to use iTerm? And I had a pretty sweet setup here. I'm using Starship's basically terminal prompt. And so you can see it does some really nice things as far as like let me know what branch I'm on with like pretty icons, lets me know if like there are things to push to origin. And so right now if I go ahead and push this, for example, you'll notice that the the icon's totally updated. And on top of that, it does these cool little optimizations, like tell you how many seconds things took, which again, like, is it critical? Like, debatable, but it's just one of those developer experience things that I really enjoy. And so being able to just easily tell, and then you might have noticed too, like my node version is explicit when I'm on something. So things like this to me make the experience even better. And so for a while, this may seem really petty. I couldn't get the icon here to show up for a bit. It was bothering me. So I'd always just use iTerm, I think, out of habit. But yeah, trying to get better with shortcuts and stuff. So anyhow, let's go ahead and start up our server. Okay, so there we go. See, I don't know actually how to start a new session up with the keyboard shortcut. Let's see, Command Shift asterisk. Can I do it? It feels kind of awkward. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of want to be able to just like, maybe there's a different way. Maybe that's like a note for later to figure out how to start another window, because those three shortcuts are kind of weird for my left hand. Anyways, let's go ahead and open that up inside of our browser so we have something to take a look at. Okay. Okay, so I started playing around with this concept a little bit last night, and so this idea of panels. And so we can see here that what this is using right now is CSS perspectives and transforms to kind of help shift things. And so one of the prototypes I got working was being able to kind of like move the screen over, right? Because that's really what we want. And so one of the things then to sort of continue this experiment, so let me just go ahead and refresh this. So one, these are super big now. Since we are in prototyping mode, I'm not really concerned with how it looks. So let's go ahead, and I'm just gonna make these widths a lot smaller. And so height, screen, width. Yep, I'm gonna make this actually 300, 150. There you go, that's a little bit better. But then I need to make, so I'm using CSS grid here to sort of divvy up the panels. And so if I know that they're each column at 300, but yeah, how big is this window? This window is probably not very big actually. We are looking at, oh, we're only looking at like 500, 600. Okay, 600 divided by 3. We're really looking at like 200 pixels for each column. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go even shorter just for the sake of demo, and then 150 here, and then let's just do 75 here. Great. Okay, cool. So okay, now we have our perspectives. This perspective is not as stark though, so I'm gonna go ahead and update the rotation a bit more. Yeah, here we go, so we can see it a little bit more. So let's make it 50, and then the perspective, I think I can shift it forward a little bit. Yeah, okay, that's a little bit more obvious to me. Okay, so right now, again, I'm sort of playing around with what happens when we're sort of shifting the games, right? Because that's what we're ultimately doing. So I have this panel experiment here, but as I showed here in Sketch, really the idea here is we're starting with this panel that like has a button. We click on it, we start the game. So let's actually, let's start with that first. I think that's probably the better thing to do. So inside of here, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new view. I'm gonna call it Space Game. So Space Game is gonna need its own route. All right, so we'll call it Space Game. All right, Space Game, and the name is Space Game. And just to make sure it's in the navbar so we can easily toggle it, let's go ahead. Ooh, I think I have the wrong thing. Where is panel? Panel is in, oh, right. This does not have a navbar just yet. So, app.view. Yes, here we go. So here we go, router link to Space Game. That's what we're building today. All right, we have our Space Game, and there's nothing in it, which totally makes sense because what we need to do is create a view for that, which is here. I just want to make sure, I thought I hadn't created it yet. Okay, so just to make sure something's showing up, Space Game, Space Game. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is basically create a div that's a panel that contains a button for start game. It's basically what we wanted to do. And so just to give it a little bit of semblance of style, we'll have the panel with a border 2px solid black. Let's just make it width. Let's do 300, height 400, like that. Oh, that's way too big for our. Okay, this is better. Okay, so that's fine, but I still want to shrink this a bit. So 203. Okay, great. And then we margin 0 auto so that it's in the center. All right, so let's see. Display flex align item center, so everything's in the middle. Justify content center. Okay, great. And then we'll call this the panel button. And our panel button is gonna be border radius 50%. Width. How big is our panel one? So I'll make this 75 pixels, height 75 pixels. And if you can guess, this makes a circle, and we have our panel. Great. Okay, so what we want to do is when we click this, we are going to start the game. So we're going to need to actually track this. So we're going to use a setup function. So we're going to still get more practice with the composition API. And so right now we want to track a series of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the reactive property from as a helper method from Vue. And so what that's going to let us do basically is then basically track reactive variables. So I'm going to just call it state, and then so this again, the state, right? I could also call it data. Is our equivalent of setting up our data function that is a function that returns like an object. And so we're just gonna basically recreate that inside with the reactive function. I'm just gonna call it state instead of data, since data already has a term and I don't really want to conflict the two. And so we'll say, let's see, game status. And so we can basically say that it would say not started. But it's never returned, right? So because we're in the setup method, we have the return state. Here we go. And then now you'll see though that if we want to render this, right, to see the game status, and we might be compelled to go, okay, well, it's game status. This won't work because right now we're returning just state, which means we need to actually go like state.gameStatus, and now we get this not started piece, which is fine. But as we know, one of the things we like about Vue is that it does help us when it comes to sort of like not having to pretend everything. And so since state for now is basically for now our global object that we're using to make things reactive, I want to instead like break it down. So you might be thinking like, oh, I'll just like spread it out, right? That'll do the trick. But it doesn't work that way because you need to actually break it down into individual reference, which are it's kind of it's kind of a complicated thing that even haven't totally wrapped my head around. But basically, we need to break everything down into its reactive pieces. Because if you think about it this way, reactive makes the whole object like reactive, so you track every little piece. But when you spread something out, you kind of basically you break the reactivity because you're saying like, oh, this object you're watching, like we need to make every single piece of that reactive. And so that's what toRefs does basically, is to say, take every piece of what you're about, like this thing you're about to spread out, and make sure everything is reactive as you would want. And so that's why the way to do this is to spread it out using the toRefs and basically saying, make all the different pieces of my reactive object reactive. And then by doing that, we can then refactor our code now to sort of eliminate that state piece. And then you'll see now that not started works. And then to verify that it's actually reactive, we can simply do an @click here. It's called start game, which is going to be a method that we need to define. Also, I don't know why ESLint is yelling at me because we're in Vue 3, so it should know. Like, well, one, it's working here, so this is just like an ESLint thing, and it annoys me, but I don't want to stop the stream to sit here and configure an ESLint bug. So let's keep going. We're going to start the game. And start the game is just a function, right? So again, we're think of this like our methods. We're defining a variable that is assigned a function. And again, rather than this.gameStatus, because there's no this, right? All right, let me clarify. For my JavaScript aficionados, there is certainly a this context, but the this context no longer refers to the global Vue instance that you might be used to in sort of standard method when you're assigning methods, because now you can really be explicit because you know that it's in state. So you just say state.gameStatus, and what we want to say, we just want to say game started. Like that's how we can tell that something's changed. Okay. And so again, it's like yelling at me because why? We are now, because we're in the composition API, we really do need to be explicit with everything we're trying to expose, and we are exposing the start game function to we are exposing it to the game. So here we go. Game started. Okay. So now that we have this is great. And so now I kind of want to simulate a little bit of sort of the basic idea I have of like, you hit the button, the panel sort of like sinks down, disappears, and then we're left with the sort of the rest of the game. And so what we're going to do here is, actually I'm going to just commit this real quick. Just so that in case I completely botch something later, this is a great place to commit. So we added space game basic start scaffold. Okay, so we have a reactive thing now where when the game page loads, it hasn't been started, and then when it's started, then it goes and does that. And so what we're gonna do is, again, my sort of the mental model I have here is that we're in like a spaceship, you have panels, and so we want this thing to like sync away. So I think I need to set a stage basically of this. So we're gonna do something, all right, here's what we're gonna do. Game status, that's fine. I'm gonna call, okay, we're gonna have a div, I'm gonna call it game stage. And then the panel will sit in here. And then there will be a stage panel. I'm trying to position it. So I'm envisioning in my head, okay, so if game stage, right, let's just define it so we can walk through this together. So game stage here, again, we're just gonna make it a box that has a border. I'll just make it 5px solid. This time we'll just make it green to make it easy. And so that's not bad, but what we really want is, again, I'm just gonna make the height explicit in this case. And this time for the panel, I'm gonna make it position, actually, you know what? No, I know what to do. So I'm gonna do transform translate y minus 50%. I think this should work. Okay, great. I want it the other way around. So I want it like 75%, like that. No, more. Okay, great. And so hold on, I think so here, what we have here, we have our panel, and this is going to be like our game stage. And so when we click on this, I want this to sort of move off, and then basically let's say disappear. Actually, let's just go that far. And so you might be thinking like, oh, that's kind of crazy, but I assure you it's not as tricky as you think it is. So what we want to do is basically add a CSS class that will transition it downwards and the opacity out, right? So you'll see. So here, let me. So the CSS here is that from dot panel, we want to go dot panel is hidden, and what it's hidden will do is it'll do a transform translate, and we'll translate on the y-axis. And I'm just gonna do 150% just to see if this works. And then what we need to do then, again, because this is what a lot of you don't know who haven't worked a lot with CSS, is that CSS itself is super powerful. I know that for those of us, or I wouldn't consider myself like originally JavaScript, but like for those who have a stronger JavaScript background, it's easy to want to just manipulate everything in JavaScript. But if you think about it, like think of CSS as built-in APIs that leverage, like do a lot of the magic for you with performance optimization, so you don't have to think about it. And so here with the transition, we want to transition our transform piece, and I'll make it half a second ease in. So what I'm saying is whenever this element on dot panel is transitioning on the transform, like if something is changing, do a transition on it over half second. And so the way we're going to test this is on game panel, we're going to do a dynamic class where basically if I think it was game status equals game started, if this is true, then like basically pop on is hidden, although this might replace the whole thing entirely if I remember correctly. So ooh, okay, actually that worked. Hang on, okay, this is actually super annoying me. So we're just gonna wrap everything in a div right now to get rid of that red underline, because again, I don't want to spend time debugging that with you. So you see that it actually shifted down. So if we start over again and update and sit, boom, magic. And we're not done yet because I want to transition another piece, which is the opacity. And this time I'm gonna do it over 0.8 seconds, and I'll ease in that. And the reason for that is because let's see this. Yeah, so let's see if this works. That did not work at all. Thought I was right. I think I maybe have to explicitly set opacity to 1 here. Maybe that's the difference. Nope. Transition opacity. Hey Mohammed, how's it going? CSS transition opacity, ease in out. Yeah, did I mess that up? Yeah, that is the transition. All right, hold on. Let me make sure it's not like I wrote the transition property incorrectly. So here, Oh, something interesting happened there. Transition multiple properties CSS. Maybe my syntax is just wrong. Let's see. Transition height. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Ha, comma. It's always those one characters. Look at that. Ah, that was too good. Okay, hang on. Let me show you what's happened. So, so we replay it. Click. Boom. Magic disappears. It moves a little too much though, I think, for this. So let's try that again. All right. Maybe not enough. All right. That's enough fiddling with that. But yeah, here we have, and there you go. The game has started, right? Because they have acknowledged it. It's shifting down. It's disappearing, and the game has officially started. So that is cool. That was actually fairly easy to do. Just by, again, we have our base class here. And though sometimes it takes a little reminder, like this is what's, I think, particularly elegant about Vue, is that it does try to do things in as declarative way as possible. And don't get me wrong, we should probably do a computed property with this, just to make it a little bit easier. But the idea that just that you can dynamically bind a class and Vue will merge them together, so that this doesn't just simply just take over the whole class. I think it's just great from a maintainer's perspective, because there's just one less thing I have to worry about, because I know that panel will always be stable, but I know this is the one piece that gets updated back and forth. So, okay, so we have that. I'm just going to add, let's just commit that. So we add the start game hide panel animation. It's awesome. Click. Ah, so much fun. Okay, so now that we have this, the original idea with our game here is that we would be able to have individual sort of mini games that users can play. And then we need to basically be able to track how many games they've won. And so if I'm breaking this down in its simplest form, let's start by initializing the mini games. And then each mini game has its own state, which tracks at a larger context as far as how many games are completed. So the way we're going to do that is, let's see. I think okay, so what we're going to do, we already know each game is its own context, right? Because it's going to have its own, call it, rules and conditions, but there are going to be consistent behavior from like what the game is going to do, from like the game has now started, and then you could imagine like we could track, well obviously if the player has won, then that needs to be something, and then arguably I think let's keep it simple. I think I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here. So I'm just going to call it minigame. So I think this is a little bit, it looks minigame. Yeah, I like that as 2 words. So minigame is our new component we're going to have. And then, so minigame here, just to make sure it's good to go. And so now we're going to go ahead and import our minigame from components minigame. All right. So now that that's been imported, we can go ahead and, oh wait, we need to register it, right? Because even though we're using composition API, that's mainly for data management, we still need to tell Vue that it's being registered. So we can go ahead and just do minigame here. So I mentioned we're going to have multiple ones, but one thing at a time is basically what I'm trying to propose here. So let's make it very clear we're inside of minigame, so like we can see where the concerns are. So I'm going to go ahead and just close out all those tabs again. So as far as minigame is concerned, let's go ahead and wrap this. So again, I'm practicing my keyboard shortcuts. So here you would typically like just hit the end and the end of the line. So you basically do this. You go div and then like, oh my gosh. See, this is why the keyboard shortcuts are important. So that took me like, I don't know, a few seconds to do. And that's assuming it was fluid motion. But back to this, what you can do instead is with Emit, there's a command called wrap with abbreviation. So basically it'll wrap the code you're doing with whatever tag you're looking for. So in this case, I've set the command to be command M and then command W. And you see that it says enter abbreviation. So in this case, I'm just going to say section. and that will go ahead and do that. And then you can also do pretty interesting things from like section dash minigame, right? And so that automatically appended the class and everything without me having to like sort of make it look pretty. Like you can see it indented everything properly, which is great. Anything we can do to kind of shortcut. So I'm trying to be better about that. So again, that's the, just in case anyone's watching, this is the wrap with abbreviation. And so if you're like, oh, how'd you get that like keyboard shortcut? I just want you to know that when you do keyboard shortcut preferences, open keyboard shortcuts, you can see actually all the key bindings you have inside of VS Code. And so I would just recommend just filtering down by Emit, and you'll be able to see a bunch of different ones that you can, if you're making use of it a lot, or you find that you're wasting time like trying to, fiddle with things, then definitely check this section out for things you can commonly do. So again, that one, just as a final reminder, is the Emit wrap with abbreviation. Okay, so minigame, how's minigame gonna go? Minigame's gonna have a border of, oh, what's a fun color? Let's say cyan. Great. Actually, I don't want a border. No, border's good. Border's good. Okay, that's a little too bright. Oh, I forgot VS Code could do that. I want it to be a little bit darker. I need it to have, for now, some padding. Let's do it 2 rem. And let's just be explicit about its width and height for now, because eventually we're going to have multiple ones. So, ooh, now that's too dark. Yeep, yeep. Okay, better. Okay, so we have our mini game here. That's good. And interesting, this thing's moving. Okay. So we have our mini game. What's the easiest game? Well, the easiest game we can probably create right now is basically to match text, right? For those who have played Among Us, is that enter password thing. So what we can do is actually, let's say, let's create a prompt that says enter password. And for now, let's just hard code it to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what we're gonna do is we'll create a label that says, this is password. So this is a secret password. And because we're having fun with this, let's create a class called post-it. And post-it is just gonna be a background color yellow. And then we're just gonna give it, this will be a position absolute, bottom right, whoops, now what am I talking about? Bottom 0, right 0. Whoa, okay, so jumped all the way down. What happened? What happened is that it needs, when you do position absolute, it goes to the parent, whatever that is. And so in this case, it is position relative. That is what it is. So we want it only to be absolute in relation to the minigame. And so I'm gonna go ahead and, yep, that's pretty good. Give it a little bit of padding, great. I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller. And then padding 1, great. So right 10 pixels, no, -10, great. So -50, -50, doing this totally on the fly. Here we go. Okay, so it's like off to the side, basically, is what I want it to do. And so since I do like the game to be center real quick, I'm just going to make game stage, display flex, align item center, justify content center. And that was better, but it didn't solve my problem. Why? 1, 2, 3... okay, right, because game stage right now, okay. So the reason this is because I did a flex, and flex will make everything in a row, and I want everything to be in a column. So we do flex direction is column. Okay, better. But not loving the fact, I thought the panel, oh, I know what I did. Yeah, okay, that's why, because the panel right now is inside of the grid. Oh, this is gonna botch it. That's fine. Oh, that was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Oh, that totally fixed it. I thought the position absolute was going to completely move everything that I wanted, but okay. So we got our space game, our secret password, And so what we're going to do then is label for enter password. And then we have that now. And so our input type is going to be text. That's fine. And then ID, we want to match it to our label, which is great. And so here, oh, okay, that password needs to get moved even further. So how's it? Better. Whoops. Better. Okay. That's it's a little bit too much now. Oh my gosh. Left a 0 off. Okay, good enough for now. And so what we want to do then is have a button here, type submit, and then submit. Okay, cool. So the only thing, oh, I know why I set an explicit height on this. There we go. Much better. So what we want to do is we want to say that, hey, like when they successfully enter this password, let me hide my start game. Basically, we want to say that like minigame like passed. And so again, this minigame is very specific. But there's a couple things we need to do. One, we need to actually track what the user is typing. And then once we do that, well, actually, let's start with that. Track what the user input is. So in this case, we'll have a const of user input. Although actually user input is very generic because technically clicking on a button is input too, if we're being specific. So let's call it, yeah, user password. No, that's not it. Input password. Okay, I think input password's a little bit better. But I realized though I don't want to use refs because again, like this just kind of creates a whole bit of mess as far as reactive data and dot values and whatnot. So again, sticking with reactive is just an easier way of doing this. So I have the state I want to track, which is a bunch of reactive properties, and in this case, then I can track the password input. And in this case, again, should just be should be colon. There we go. Great. As usual, I always get this because I forget I save before I actually return the state. Autocomplete. Okay. Mohammed. Yeah, so I do like Tailwind a lot. One of the things I try not to use Tailwind for a lot of times is because like, especially when like sort of getting practice with certain CSS specifications, it's nice to know exactly how everything's working, just especially when you're starting to manipulate it with JavaScript. Tailwind doesn't necessarily help you in that regard. So that's why like usually when I'm building things, I try to build it from scratch, but I certainly recommend for anyone using on teams or even larger projects where you have multiple contributors, Tailwind definitely can be really beneficial as far as setting standards. And so I certainly borrow from Tailwind principles and stuff when I'm creating my own style sheets, but it's just one of the things where I try to start with the bare minimum, especially as I'm coding and prototyping. But good tip, Mohammed. I appreciate that. Okay, so we have our state here, but then as we talked about earlier, I don't like to actually refer to the state directly inside of the template. So I use two refs to spread that thing out. And so that way, inside of our mini game, to show what the user input is, or password input really, the password input, it should be bound to password input. And so again, just to validate that something's in there, we can say this is wrong. Okay, password input is wrong, great. And then here, what we want to do is tie this v model directly to password input. So this should track it, 1, 2, 3, and it doesn't totally work. This is interesting. Wasn't expecting this. So we can see that it's typing, but it's not actually updating v. Is it because it's default value? Password input. Nope. Yeah, requires no argument. That's what I'm under the impression as well. So it's setting it initially, but not updating the field. I doubt I ran into a bug. Oh, I didn't run into a bug. Okay, I just needed to refresh. I was gonna say, I was like, hello. Hello, Alex. Thank you for joining. Yeah, okay, for a second I was like, I could have sworn this should work. This shouldn't be a bug. Okay, so we have a password import. It's wrong. Great. And then just so we have some state to compare, this one is going to be correct password, right? That should yell at us because there's, oh, it doesn't yell at us, but correct password again for now is 1234. And then, so now what we need to do is check that basically when we submit this, if it's right, go ahead and say whether the game is right or wrong. So let's say, again, so inside of our status, game status is, again, just in progress for now. Let's keep it simple. This is where I start to miss TypeScript a little bit, because what I would theoretically want is I would call like game status, type game status. And what we could do is we could go like not started. And so basically you're saying it's a string, but it can only be like these three values, win or like one. And this is, again, it's just nice for a little bit of type checking and documentation, but again, we're not using TypeScript right now. We are just using vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so let's show that real quick. Game status in progress. And so if, okay, so let's see. So let's see, check password is going to be our method. So I'm going to say if to do correct password is equal to password input, then we're going to say state.gameStatus is equal to player wins. And then otherwise, theoretically, we could, well, I probably need, we need some validation. We'd be like, wrong password. This is technically not a game state, but far be it from me. Okay, whoop, I forgot. We need state in front of both of these because it's not exposed. And then check password, yes, has not been assigned, has never been used. I know. So check password for now, we're gonna add it on here. Check password, but I also like to do it on keyup.enter. Check password here. So that way, for those of us who are used to hitting enter instead, we can still do what we want to do. So if I do 1, 2, 3, enter, wrong password, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, player wins, huzzah. Okay, so we have one of our, basically our basic mini games up and running, which is wonderful. So now though, okay, actually let's commit this. We have like a basic mini game here, very simple. Feature add secret password minigame. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to actually be able to tell once, like basically in condition have like minigame 1, we need the parent to basically track that at a larger level. So think of this as like this one is a bit more of a global state now, because we're talking about a larger piece. So we could almost call it like, this is basically the user object, because the user object can, it's starting the game, it's one certain amount of mini games, and we can have other conditions, but a lot of this does tie into this user condition. And so, again, rather than sort of getting ahead of myself when it comes to refactoring, I think what I want to go ahead and do is we're just going to create this user property inside of our app.view. Oh, sorry, not app.view, we're on spacegame.view. So I'm thinking we're going to go ahead, there's state here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just for now, just to see if my instinct's correct, I'm going to create a user that is a reactive property. And this time I'm going to say mini games 1. I'm just going to be very explicit here. User is assigned never.value. Great. So if I spread out .2refs for user, and then mini games 1. So I'll say here. So we'll have, let's see, game status. So I'm going to make this here, and then we're going to have a user properties, and then I'm just gonna say, what was it, mini games 1, I think. so put that here. Mini games 1 here. Okay, user property is not started. Great. So here, click game started, mini games 1. So what we need here is that when the user is correct on our mini game, it needs to emit an event up into app.view and update this property. So what we want to do then is inside of check password, right? If we actually have the correct state, in addition to just toggling the game status, what we want to do is actually emit an event. So you might be thinking like, okay, well, in Vue 2, the way we did this was like this $emit, and we would like do the event. Well, unfortunately, again, we are in setup, which means we are really in vanilla JavaScript world, and this no longer points directly to the Vue context. So what we need now is for Vue to provide us some sort of method for emit. And how does it do that? Well, in case you didn't know, setup actually has 2 different properties that come with it. So hopefully, did this work? Methods, check password. No, that does look at some properties. So the TypeScript is not. Oh, you know what? Hang on a sec. I'm gonna try something real quick, because if I'm right, this will give me what I wanted. And I'll explain what I just did. If I am right. Great. Oh, perfect. Okay, so let's go backwards. Let's explain what's happening. So this is something originally when I was doing research for my TypeScript course that I'm doing Vue Mastery. I was like, oh, this is a TypeScript thing, right? Like I only do this in TypeScript. Where I say, okay, define component, because this is something I saw in all like the .ts stuff. Turns out, yeah, it's not a TypeScript thing, or sorry, yes, you do need it for TypeScript. Without this, doesn't work. But even if you're not using TypeScript, I basically the fact that I just remembered this reminds me that I should be doing this more consistently for Vue 3 components in general, going forward, regardless of TypeScript usage. Because what this does is, as you saw earlier, TypeScript really didn't give us a lot of useful information earlier by like our editor, and we really like this is actually quite important, right? And so what you can tell here now is that not only does it tell you what properties are within it, but it actually tells you that there are 2. Can I get? Yes, I can come down here. Inside of this setup method, there are 2 different things. One is that it comes with a props argument, and there's this context that we can use. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I can double click into context, but at the bare minimum, this is a lot more information. And so the fact that you get this is pretty awesome. So props and context. So for the sake of understanding, so let's see, can it actually give me more information, please? Setup context, can it tell me more? It won't tell me anymore, unfortunately. I need to learn a little bit more about this. But okay, within context, you know what? I can just show you it. So let's just log it out real quick. What context is? See, if we had proper type definitions and yada yada, that would tell me in the IDE. I wouldn't have to log it out like this. But within the context, you see you get 3 particular properties. You get the attrs, which is our shorthand way of saying attributes. We have the emit function, and we have our slots. And so, as you might have thought, ding, 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 what we're looking for is the emit function. And so, again, I'm not going to, typically we would go ahead and destructure this to just say emit. But since I think most people aren't really familiar with this context variable, I do want to be more explicit with using it. So as people get more familiar with it, then when they see other people shortcut it, they're not just like, what are they doing here? Like, where's this magic coming from? Because that's how I felt a lot with sort of advanced Vue libraries, is people started taking shortcuts in places where like I just lack the contextual background. And so again, so we have context now, and context is what we really need. So here what we're saying is context.emit, then we follow the same thing, right? We have the event name. So we're gonna say mini game 1, and then the payload, to be honest, I don't need a payload. I just need to emit that event for now. And so we can go inside of our space dot, actually, you know what? I'm gonna show you this cool thing I learned earlier. So we want space game, right? If you hit Command Enter, it opens it in the side panel. I don't know about you, I did not know that. And so I've always had to like open it, click it, drag it, and yeah, I should really share that with more people. But I discovered that I think this morning or last night, was super excited. because I split screen a lot just to compare things. So again, we have here our context emit minigame 1. And so where do we want to use that? Well, we want to use that directly on our component to indicate we're listening to it. So on minigame 1, we're going to say increase, update user minigame. This is a really long method name, but it's fine. It's very explicit. So at the bare minimum, no one will be confused. So again, I think we can just close that for a little bit. Okay, so on minigame 1, run this update user minigame piece. So that, how are we going to do that? Piece OK. This is update user minigame, which is going to be, again, it's a function because that's what we want to call when we actually hear this event. And we're going to go inside of user.minigames1, and then we're just going to do ++. And so we need to, I always forget to do this. Update user minigame. I will say, I think Evan was prototyping some ideas, and so I think if we use a script setup block, which to explain very quickly just means that you have a script and you have this setup attribute, that one of the things is that we wouldn't have to, I think, explicitly define the return object. Like, kind of like, I forgot how the logic works exactly, but it can basically infer what we want from it, which is pretty great because you can see I'm running into this error a lot, and it's not on purpose too, like some teaching scenarios. Okay, so anyways, I have my update user minigame. It should increase. Great. And so now the password is wrong right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Increment. Hey, 1. Of course, this is a bug because now we can just like increment our minigames forever. But we have a minigame, and it's updating a sort of a wider, sort of a larger shared state. As far as like this user that's now tracking how many games this person has won. And so given we have that, I really think it's time for us to commit this. Okay. Feature at emit event for mini game 1. Okay. All right, cool. So we have one mini game where the user has to type. You know what? Let's clean this up a little bit though, because the mini game is a little cluttered. So there's a couple. Okay, so this is actually probably worth trying to discuss a little bit, but let's clean up the template real quick. We already know that the whatever the password input is, we know what that is. We don't need that. And then I do want to clean this up a little bit. Player wins. That's fine. It's going to be refresh in progress. Wrong. Fine with me. Secret password, I would like that to be just a little bit more dynamic. So this is where we get to practice with the concept of computed properties. So in this case, what I want to do is actually, I'm going to make, I'm going to pull out the computed from Vue. I think this is the best way to do this. We'll see. Because what I want to do is actually, I think I can just do it like this. Let me just make sure. So computed, just like Vue 2, you takes your whatever thing you're doing, you pass it a function that basically returns whatever you want. So just to make sure that I'm totally right that this works, I can save this, and it should be now 2, 3, 4, 5. If I do this, great, it wins, perfect. So I want to do math.random, although not just random. I do want to math.floor because you want to round it down. If I vaguely remember, don't get me wrong, I've looked this up so many times. I think this is right. Oh no, 0, is it +1? Plus, times 100. 0 to 1 times 100. Hang on, did I get it right? I think so. Refresh. Okay, better. Yeah, this is better. I need to figure out how to do it. Maybe what I do is I go from 1. Maybe I do 10,000 to like 100,000. That didn't help me. Okay, it's fine. That was I like that way better than $emit. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I think it's really cool that the emit function is just kind of sitting inside of setup, so that you can just basically pull it out and use it in JavaScript, and you're no longer bound to some sort of global function. So I think that was, yeah, that definitely is pretty cool. But okay, this is, I know I could totally look it up right now, but it's fine. Let's go ahead and I'm just gonna blow it up a little bit more. Okay, that's a little bit better. So now at least this has a little bit, what's wrong? Oh, I know. Because this needs to be, correct password is now a number, and I think I need to switch it over to string. Okay, there we go, now we're good. All right, so now that we have that, let me just for the fun of it, we've introduced some randomness into password. So now it's at least more or less a proper mini game from that regard. Certainly there's things to be talked about as far as rate limiting. Again, the fact that like I can just infinitely hit this and increase mini games one. But again, that's logistics for the larger space game strategy. And so really, though, what we want to talk about here is that minigame as a whole, though, will have different rules inside of it. This is where the component architecture gets a little bit different. So call it, we want to be able to extrapolate it so that the game can still always have the context of like listening for a win event that updates the minigames one. But in the other case, we want the rules basically to be inside in differently. So for example, we want to be able to have two different mini games. So if I drop another mini game in here, we should. Whoops! What does it not like? Oh, I didn't copy it correctly. Okay, that's a little ugly. Div. Oh, nope. Practicing keyboard shortcuts. So again, we have our two lines here: Command M, Command W to wrap it, and we have our div, and then I'm just gonna call mini game. Yes, wrapper. Okay, there we go. So now we save that. This should be a little bit better. Nope. Hold up. I think I need to display flex. Mini game wrapper display flex. And okay, better. Whoop. Okay, so yeah, some weird styling things, but that's fine. We can play around with that later. Okay. So again, we see that now we have, oh, right, this thing needs to get hit in the way. Two different passwords, which is nice because now, again, 322, that should increase. 813, that should increase. Okay, so that works as anticipated, but this wouldn't really be called a mini game if we couldn't have different, I think Alex with the win. Hang on, I'm going to have to do this. So yeah, we want to be able to do different rule sets. So what did I do wrong? Math.random. Okay, so that was right on the math.random times, plus? Oh, that's what I did wrong. 1,000. I screwed something up with the parentheses. So I think I need to wrap this in here. Yes, I think this is now safer. Hey, much better. Yay, Alex with the win. So, feature make a password more complicated. Wonderful. All right. So, although I guess I didn't explain this properly, for those who haven't seen this context before. So again, the equivalent here, right? Computed is an object that takes a list of things that are, again, essentially, when we look at it, they're really just computed, they're functions. So again, let's just call it correct password 2. This is a function that returns stuff based on your calculations. And that's the only weird syntactical thing is just to realize that now, instead of like computed being a predecessor to your variable, it is now part of like this correct password thing is a computed property that then takes this function, which would be equivalent of what's here. So again, if you're first time seeing that, takes a little getting used to at first, but it's nice because now you can be, again, declarative about what should be computed, what should not. And certainly, don't get me wrong, right? If you're like, I really liked having all my computed properties grouped together, that's fine. You can just do like a computed like this, make it a reactive object, and then everything in here, right, from correct password 2 would just have basically this computed thing here. And you can just collect all your computed properties in one place if you really wanted to do this. Again, one of the beautiful things about Composition API is the fact that you do get to define things as you desire, but certainly that does mean organization is not only up to you, but that means that if you step into anti-patterns or make things more complicated for yourself, that is for you to figure out. And so yes, you always use with caution, but for now, yeah, there's something really elegant about being able to keep keep the computed directly in here rather than go somewhere else, because all this stuff is relevant to our current component. Okay. So as I was saying earlier, minigames are only fun if each minigame can have its own rules. They share the the rules of being able to emit an event that the user then can track. Hey Martin, can you reassign that computer property though? I think you can, Alex. Yes, I don't see why not. Martin, you're not late. Well, I mean, I start at 1:30 EST, but we're just hanging out. So, thanks for joining us, Martin. But yeah, I think to Alex's point, yes, you can reassign this. I don't see why not. So, again, if check password, this is state dot correct password is now explicitly, this. Oh, it's yelling at me. Fine, I'll just leave it alone. All right, so this should work though, because once I submit this, did not work. So Alex, I think maybe I'm wrong, because secret password has not updated here. And it should check password should have definitely run. And so just to make sure I am totally correct, we're gonna do password input is gonna be pushed to test. Yeah, so test got updated, but no. So Alex, I don't think it can. Actually, I actually think that makes more sense, because it is a computed property. You don't want people being able to randomly reach in and override it. So it does look like, no, once it's computed, you cannot touch it. It is in its own, call it scoped functionality. Yeah, so Martin, define component, I briefly explained about this earlier, but define component is not, it is not required. You can still do it like the normal export default. But the reason why define component is great is because, let me take it off real quick, because maybe it also wasn't that clear to people earlier, is that when you save, so you're gonna yell at me, it doesn't matter. You notice that like when I hover over setup, all it really can do is tell us a little bit about what's happening. So it can infer that like there are props, there are contexts and things, but define component allows us to take that kind of one step further. And it is a requirement for TypeScript, but not necessarily for JavaScript. And then you can see that now, like it's a lot richer of documentation from like what it's trying to do. And so that is why I think going forward, I am going to try to use it more. Though don't get me wrong, I'm staring at this. It does look a little bit like a jumbled mess. So I'm still sort of learning how to leverage the IDE's ability to give me documentation to better understand things. But yeah, you don't need to use TypeScript to have define component. It's just something that basically gives VS Code more sort of, let's call it inferred typing, so that you don't have to do it initially yourself. So again, like you can see here, reactive tells us like what property it is that, oh, look, that this is a computed ref. That's like a tight string, like, oh, that's great. And then again, if I'm pretty sure if I split this off, I was still doing that. So this is, I will say this is one thing that's really cool about Vue being in TypeScript. But there is an advantage to having defined component, if I remember correctly. But I'll play around with that more and let you all know. But that's why I think I'm going to start using it, just to make it a little bit easier moving forward in the event I want to migrate to TypeScript. One less thing to do. But okay. So where were we? We were talking about abstracting the mini game into its own set of rules, because right now we basically have a secret password game, and that's the only kind of mini game we have, and really we want different ones. And so what I'm gonna do now is let's go ahead and start. The easiest thing for me right now, I think, mentally, is to let's go ahead and create minigame 2, a minigame 2 component. And the reason why I say that is because we're gonna it allows us to see a little bit more of what's shared and what's not. And so I'm just gonna copy minigame over here, like that. Then minigame 2, like that, as such. So now when we go to space game, rather than this should be minigame 2. And then we can copy this, minigame 2, copy this entire line, split these into minigame 2, and then minigame 2. So I'm sort of more of the opinion that typically, again, I prefer that when we do refactorings, that it's sort of being able to see things sort of, I call it data-driven refactoring, to make it really obvious. And so, for example, in minigame 2, for now, let's see, what I'm going to do for this one is you need to press a series of colors in a certain order. And then if you do it in the correct order, then you win. So that's like the simplest game I can think of right now. And so what we can do then is we can delete the post-it, because that's not going to be relevant to this game. No input, no password. We're not even gonna verify any of this. Game status, that's universal. So already we're starting to get a feel for what, so again, I'm just gonna remove check password. That's not relevant. Okay, in progress is good. These are all irrelevant. So again, the fact that, whoops, yeah, I know. This is not used, reactive refs. Okay, so this is already telling me, actually we look at this already, that this is basically the base minigame right here. Is its ability to track in progress, and then actually it does need an update method, but we'll refactor that when the time comes. What we're gonna do, we're gonna build our second minigame. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is have a swatch of colors. And so let's just keep it simple. We're going to do a 3-row swatch of colors. And so I'm going to go ahead and call it, so we have a div of color swatches. And inside of our color swatch, we're going to have different color swatch divs. Okay. And so to make sure this works correctly before, again, let's not get ahead of ourselves and refactor. We're going to have 3 blocks inside of color swatches. Actually, I realized I really don't like it when we name things so close to each other, like swatches and then individual swatch. I think there's a lot of error sometimes with people either pluralizing it or incorrectly pluralizing. So I prefer trying to split it out as visually as possible. So again, we have our color swatch wrapper that will rarely get messed up. So again, I'm just going to do a grid for this one. Actually, real quick, let's do color swatch and then border 1px solid red. So, ooh, that looks weird. With, let's see, padding 1 rem. Okay, good. So we see our divs are stacking up one another. I'm going to go ahead and make them side by side. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the grid template columns on CSS, and then we want to do 3 rows of equal proportions, so 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 1 fraction, either basically equal parts. And just to explain that, what you can do is you can do repeat, so repeat it 3 times, 1 fraction. That's another way of doing it. And then to add some column gaps, is it columns gap? Grid column gap, grid gap columns. Oh, come on, I thought I had it right. Yes, I do have it right. Why is that? That was weird. All right, so just 10 pixels. And you can see like rather than do the whole like first child has margin right and then like last child has margin left, and instead of messing with that, you just grid column gap, done. Okay, we have our colors, but what we want to do is sort of make them dynamic. And so we're gonna keep this I guess more like, so this part doesn't need to be reactive for now. So I'm actually gonna split this out. So we're going to have a fixed set of colors for now until we decide we want to get fancy with color generation and that kind of thing. And so I'll call it color options, right? And so our color options will be an array, and we're going to do red, blue, green. This is going to be like as simple and as contrasty as we can get. But what this does nicely for us is that it basically, like red, green, color blindness and stuff, this still allows people to see everything. So this is good. And then I'm just going to go ahead and expose this as color options because this is a static property. Like we still want to expose it to the template, but it no longer needs to be reactive. We're basically saying this is, again, in so many words, we're basically saying this is static. We don't need to do anything about it. So what we can do now is loop through, as you might have guessed, color in, what was it, color options, I believe. So again, I like being more explicit with color options rather than color in colors. All it takes is one letter to make a mistake. This provides us a little bit more context. So the key for now is going to be, I usually like to compose my own. So for now is going to be color, and I'm just going to pop in the index just because I usually don't want to be like run to something else that I'm prototyping later that might have it. This is still not foolproof, but it's a start. And then for everything, we're going to say we have an explicit style where we're going to style equals background color is, whoops, I do need that backtick actually. We want the color. That's it. And hey, we have our colors. Very cool. And then actually just to make it, we want to practice accessibility. So can we print the colors inside? Ooh, that looks pretty bad. Hang on a sec. Color white, font weight bold, and I'm just gonna make the, actually I don't think I need to decrease the font size. I think we're good. And hey, okay, we have it now. Excellent. So, dun dun dun. Okay, red, blue, green. Now, user's gonna have to hit the right combination in the right order in order for us to basically say that it's correct. And so in order for us to do this, again, let's see, mini game. It's actually bothering me a little bit that says here's a mini game too. Okay, so what we need to do then is click, click, click. And so every time we click, we register what the user inputs. And so this is a reactive property. This we want to keep track of. So, so user sequence, I'm going to call it. And user sequence is going to be an array. That's how we're going to keep track of things. So this should be 1 by 1 by 1. And then as we click, we're going to say add color to sequence. Again, being very, very explicit here. This is literally what we're doing. We're not going to try to be like on click or whatever. We're adding color to the sequence. And so then we say state.user sequence.push. Oh, okay, this is where it's going to be a little bit more trickier. So we actually need to, there's going to be an event when it clicks. No, actually don't necessarily need to do that. We're just going to pass the color directly in actually. This should work as expected. And so just to make sure I'm right, we're going to go ahead and expose. See, this time I did remember though, add color to sequence. Great, that is, and then we're going to render out our sequence below here. User sequence is going to be user sequence. So nothing here yet, great. And every time we click on the, oh, you know what? Div is actually a terrible element to use for this. So now I get to show you another, I think I'm going to say Liga. I apologize, I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. The reason why I'm using reactive instead of ref is because when using ref, what I've noticed with a lot of people who are starting with the composition API for the first time, the number one thing that throws people off when using ref is that when, let's say we're doing const game status 2 equals ref, again, let's say, like, again, similar to the game status there in progress, is now when you're updating it, right, you actually need to do things like game status 2 dot value equals like game1. And so that dot value has just enough of a friction that I think that it's kind of weird for people who aren't thinking at the proxy level of like how reactive objects work. And then it just sort of complicates the code, right? Because if you have some things that are ref, some things are reactive, then it does make it a little bit harder for people to track. On the other hand, when you use something like reactive, this is something that people are actually fairly used to. So I think I explained earlier that this is basically the rough equivalent of saying like data, right, is a function that returns an object. And most people coming from Vue 2 are already familiar with this concept. So reactive is only just like a step away from that. And then the benefit of this too is that with now that it's reactive, like in an object like this, you'll notice that when I'm actually changing things, I don't have to do like user sequence dot value dot push. I just have to like, I would write it just as you would expect, which is just like, take the thing I care about and then just update it. As opposed to ref, which has that unpacking thing and this slight detriment from an ergonomics perspective, that unpacking piece. As I mentioned before, the only thing is that when you want to spread out the reactive pieces, because you don't want to have to in your template go state.gameStatus, state.userSequence, you can you use the spread operator, but you must unpack everything into individual refs. And so it's a little bit of a weird thing, but like you unpack it into refs so that in the template you don't have to prefix it with the state, or in my case state. So hopefully that helps to answer your question. If you need some more clarification, I'm happy to keep talking about it, because I know this is gonna be one of those things the community will be talking about for a while, as far as like ref or reactive. And I think for most people to stick with reactive, and then in the future if you're starting to feel like there are reasons to go the ref route for whatever reason, I'm not going to claim to know everything, then certainly you'll have the flexibility to dive a little bit deeper. But reactive, honestly, I think covers most of people's use cases. The only thing you need to learn is this two refs piece, just to make it a little bit simpler. Okay, so I think game status, where's game status 2? What did I do? Oh yeah, I did that. That's what I did. Okay. I was going to tell you. Okay, so this is a horrible element, right? Anyone in the accessibility community would be like, what are you doing, Ben? And that's because this really, what is it? What are we doing? What are we clicking on? We are clicking on buttons. And so you might be thinking like, okay, what I would normally do is I'd like go here and update button, and then go down here and update button. Or you might be like, I'm going to do a multiple cursor thing. But one of the things we learn in development is, first of all, HTML can get really long, and it can be kind of a pain to do that. And so again, just teach more shortcut commands. With Emit, there's something called update tag. Yes. And what that does is, as you might expect, is that it'll be able to track basically what element you're working on. So in my case, my keyboard shortcut is Command M, Command U, and it'll tell me what update I want to do. And if I type button and hit enter, you see it automatically swaps out the HTML pairing for me, without me having to like trace where it is. Because I don't know about you, I've definitely worked on things where things were so long that it was, I just spent unnecessarily like mental cycles trying to figure that out. Emit does that for you, just with a keyboard shortcut. Oh, sorry, it doesn't have to be a keyboard shortcut. If you do Command Shift P and you just do Emit like update, you can, the command prompt, you can just do it manually like that. I think I work with front end enough that it's worth for me to start learning this muscle memory to make it easier for me to sort of stay in a flow state when I'm thinking of things and just want to get it done, rather than having to switch contexts and do certain things. So just a little tip for anyone using VS Code, or Emit for that matter. Oh, it looks like the button styles have overtaken my swatches. So let's, let's go ahead and copy some of let's move some of these styles. I think it just needs to be a little bit, sit a little bit lower. Okay. Red, blue, green. Oh, great. Now we get like some basic default states. It's not great. And maybe if I just move this border, it'll be easier to see. Okay, there we go. Now we have some focus states that are a little bit more obvious. Okay, what did we say we're going to do? We are going to click. All right, when we click, what do we want to do? I said it was like add color to sequence. Love autocomplete. Save. So when we click, that that's not good. 2, 3. Why is that? Well, one, I said that I would pass. Actually, why is my terminal open? One of the things I'm really trying to be better about with VS Code is trying to steer clear of having clutter. And so you might have noticed when I open my folder menu, 1 is coming from the right, and 2, it's super big. And the reason I keep it super big is because I want to remind, like when it's just small enough that I'm not paying attention, I kind of like, if it's like here, it's almost like something you can kind of ignore, but if you think about it, it's still noise from a mental attention span perspective. And so Caleb's advice is just to make it kind of obnoxiously large so that you don't let it just take up space in your head. And so in this case, what am I doing? Oh, I don't need that. So I was just saying I'm trying to get more sensitive to that so I can utilize the space that I have more easily. Pain to work without it. Yes. So Martin's question was about DevTools Vue 3. So yeah, currently the team, I think Vue Router 4 is in release candidate and DevTools is very close. If you're looking to set up your own, basically Vue.js dev, is it dev? I think it's just DevTools. I could be wrong. It might be Vue DevTools. Rats. I should probably have this memorized, shouldn't I? Yeah. So as far as DevTools go, it is getting closer. So yeah, sorry, Martin. It is kind of difficult to work without it, but I do actually have a video on setting it up. So if you're on my channel later and you're looking to set up your own local version, you'll see here that how to set up Vue 3 apps with DevTools teaches you how to basically clone this repo. And you might be thinking like, oh, is it really that difficult? It's just a little tricky just because you have to go into, I think it was like the next branch, and then you have to run a couple of different commands that aren't immediately intuitive for people who aren't used to working on extensions. I know I was completely lost until I had someone walk me through it. So that's why I created the video. So if you're looking to work with Vue 3 and DevTools, definitely check that out. It's not Guillaume, which is Acronym, you might know him by. They do try to publish the DevTools in the Chrome extension store, though. I will say it's just in beta. So that just means sometimes, like, if you find that something's broken, there is a possibility it's the DevTools, it's not you. So that is one of the frustrating things. So Martin, fingers crossed. I'm hoping that DevTools will be official soon. But in the meantime, yeah, if you want to just set up your own local environment, definitely recommend just building it yourself for now. In the meantime, okay, so we have a couple of problems. One is that our add to color sequence is receiving the event. And this is not a problem. This is actually how JavaScript works, right? Like when you click on an event, you want it to pass the event. But in our case, though, I don't need the event because I have the color already. So my plan is to just pass in the color like this. And let's see if this works. 1, 2, 3. And it does work. So it looks like by doing this, we have overridden the default behavior. We no longer get the event. If you wanted the event and the color for whatever instance, then what you would need to do is basically break this up into the event because it'll be basically a payload. And so just to make sure to show you all that this actually did work, we can say state.username_sequence.push event. So now we'll see, now we get the okay, I am right, but I overwrote it here like this. Oh, I'm wrong again. What did I mess up? There's a way to do the payload. Okay, my apologies. I thought, let me see. Nope, no one commented on this yet. Oh, I could have sworn you could do this though. With the event and a payload, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I forgot what that is. Okay, if you ever need it though, I guess that's something we can figure out at another point. It's a dollar event? Ah, Alex to the rescue, I think. Oh gosh, is it this? Ha! Yay. Thank you, Alex and Liga. Oh, appreciate it. I knew I was missing something. I was like, this works the way I think it should. Yes, okay, right. Because otherwise, and I just realized why. It's because here, JavaScript is looking for an actual variable like that's called event. So if we call this event, for example, like this would map correctly, like in as far as like Vue is concerned. But because we want something native, then this is why we have to basically prepend it with a $sign to say like, hey, Vue knows what it's not like. Hey, Vue, we actually want the regular event. We don't just want any variable called event. So thank you. I had a feeling someone in the chat would know what's going on. Nonetheless, we don't need the event right now. We just need the color. So I can take that out. And then 1, 2, 3, great. Okay, so we have our colors, but you're probably thinking like, oh, this is a problem because why? Well, the problem is that we can keep clicking and we only need a sequence of 3 colors to win the mini game. So first, I'm going to go ahead and still commit this because, again, I'm a fan of micro commits so that if we break everything, we can just reset our changes. I can't tell you how many times I forgot to micro like commit small changes, and then I like blew everything away because I was frustrated, and then I lost like so much. So the feature is add ability to track user sequences. Okay. So a couple of things. I think the first thing we're going to do is just make sure that every time we hit 3 colors, it basically let's just reset it. Let's just do that much of the functionality. So the way we want to do this is we're actually going to be tracking the user sequence. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to use another helper method, right? And so you're probably thinking like, if I were to do this, I probably want some sort of watch functionality. And so you'd absolutely be right. And so what I'm going to use though, I'm going to use watch effect instead of watch. Ooh, why is it capitalizing? I don't think that's right. Yes, okay, this is right. Yeah, so watch effect camel case. Basically, if you're looking in the V3 docs for watch effect, basically it does the watch thing, but I don't know, for those who've worked with watch a lot, sometimes you want the thing to watch immediately, and then you have to like add like a parameter to this. And so rather than forcing you to do that, this basically just tracks all the dependencies inside, like sort of kind of exactly as you would expect it to. And so I'll show you how it works. Basically, we would say here, right? You can imagine we have this watch effect. And like a lot of things you'll see when you're using the composition API is that we're passing it a function. Because why? We wanted to actually do something during this thing. So watch effect says like, while the component is alive, watch these various pieces, and if they're reactive, like do things as they're basically being watched. And so in this case, I'm going to go ahead and console.log state.userSequence.length. Okay, so again, what are we watching, right? If we're thinking about it this way, we're watching actually user sequence, and every time user sequence is happening, like trigger this thing. And so it's a little bit funny to think about actually, the more as I'm telling you. So one, you see that one, it immediately ran. So let me bump this up a little bit. You can see now that inside of DevTools we have the 0, and if we click, it's 1, 2, 3. This is awesome. This is kind of what you would expect. The other thing that other people might be used to is watch. So just to be very clear, so this would be like let me validate my own understanding. So I'm going to delete that. And then instead of watch effect, we're just going to have watch. And so way watch works is you watch something that you care about. In this case, we care about user sequence. And then we get a callback function, which basically what we want to do. And so we get 2 things. I believe we get the current value and old value, I want to say, but we'll find out. Let me make sure I am not yanking anybody's chain with this. So again, here's the old. Let's just be very explicit. This is the old value. This is the current value, just like that. Okay, so if this works the way I think it will, you can see current is red, old is that, and then you can see current is old, and the old is old. Sorry. What I'm saying here is you might be confused a little bit right now because this is doing what you want, right? You're saying, watch this property and then show me the old value and show me the current value. And you're probably thinking like, Ben, it says the same thing twice. And that's because we're actually pointing to an array, which means that we're pointing to like the array as a whole. And theoretically, like not even theoretically, technically speaking, you haven't changed you're still looking at the same array, right? If this like in the computer memory, if this was array ID 123, even though we're updating array 123 inside, we haven't actually, like, it's still array 123. It's not like you've gone from array 123 to array 456. You've just kept it at array 123. And so the way I believe to actually do this, I want to say, is deep true. And then this should still, I vaguely, okay. So this is one of the trickier things. I kind of forgot the nuances of this, just because this is part of the thing. Like, when the more you work more composition API, you are kind of forced to think of things at a lower level. I kind of can't remember why you can't diff between them, but I don't want this to get too far. Anyways, but this is like the more traditional watch that some of you may be familiar with. And also you might be like immediate true, for example, if you want it to run immediately. But in this case, I don't want to, I want to get, I think watch effect from what I've seen it's just a little bit more ergonomic. Spread it. Oh, interesting. So Alex is saying to spread the value. Oh, wait a second. Is it like this? Hang on. Old, current, old. Nope, that didn't work. What does deep true do? Lika has a great question, which I need to answer. Thank you for calling me out and asking me about this. So I want to say deep true. Yeah, it's in the watch function. I am right. So, oh no, is it not? Okay, so here we go. When the watch value is an array, any changes to it won't trigger the watcher because they've referenced the same object array. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, so because the array hasn't actually, like, we haven't swapped it out, it won't actually be able to reference it. So you can see that's why, like, this $watch, nothing's actually changed. But option deep, here we go, deep true. So when we want to detect deeply nested values inside of an object, the deep true is important. Although it looks like you don't need to do this for array mutation, so it looks like it was unnecessary for me. But for objects that have a lot of nesting, basically deep is important in the watch context. So it knows not to just watch the wrapper, but everything inside of it. That said, I still kind of, we still have something, okay, great. I kind of want to understand why I can't see the old value, because one of the things I think people want to use a lot when they're watching stuff is actually to compare, right? So theoretically, you'd want to be able to compare the current value versus the old value. And so I thought a function would do the trick. I don't know why I remember seeing that somewhere, but I'm going to spend just a couple more minutes looking into this computed and watch. Yeah, so watch effect, immediately while tracking and read run while it change, stopping the watcher. That's fine, but I just want watch. So just to be, so let's boo. Yeah, I don't know. Like here, we use the example in the docs with like ref1, and then it'll take it. So you know what, heck, let's just do this real quick. So Liga, let's go ahead and actually play around with ref a little bit. So I'm gonna switch this up real quick to ref. So again, I'm just gonna delete all this right now. So we have const current count equals ref 0, and then let's expose this here. And so current count is going to be an Actually, I'm just going to intentionally throw it up here because it's going to be throwaway code. Current count is current count. Right? So, whoops, watch is never used. Oh, I know. I wish you wouldn't yell at me. I'm prototyping here. Okay, so every time we add a color to sequence, I'm just going to comment this out real quick, and we're just going to say current count dot value plus equals 1. This is the, so actually, let me just show you. You would normally, like, you would anticipate this. You would anticipate that you would be able to just say current count plus 1, but not only is it a constant, it's a ref. So because of that, you need the dot plus 1, and then what do you mean color is never used? Oh man, yelling at me ESN all the time. So you can see now when it clicks, it updates. And so again, this is the difference with ref value. But real quick though, we wanted to actually try the watch function to see if my theory holds true. So again, we want to watch current count. So watch current count, right? This is the thing we care about. And I can't spell. Where's my autocomplete? There you go. And so inside of here, I'm going to say current value CV just for old value OV. And so again, console.log current is printout CV and old printout OV. So again, we'll see that one, it doesn't run actually immediately, right? And so if you wanted it to like display the current and old, we would pass it a configuration object that says immediate true, like run it immediately. And so you can see already that when it first started up, it was undefined, and then it initialized it at 0. And so now when we click on this now, you'll see old is 0, current is 1, 2, 1. So I am right. So this, with the primitives, this works exactly as you would expect. You can see the current value, and you can say the old one. There's an RC for ref sugar, but nobody liked it. I won't go so far to say no one liked it. Like it's still in discussion. I'll put it that way. So for those who don't know what like I was talking about, RFC ref sugar. Oh, whoops. That could have ref sugar RFC view. There is a proposal right now. Is it here? No, not this one. Here. I think this is the one. Yeah, here it is. So there's still discussions around this, but the idea here is that inside of your script setup block, what you can do is basically define your refs this way, which will then make it so that the variable can be used as a plain value. There certainly is, we can see there's a lot of downvotes. A lot of people are not happy about this. But I think what's important for us to think about as a framework, yeah, it looks like it got closed. I will need to look over what happened. It's been a while since I tracked this. One of the things we have to realize as a framework is when we are considering pushing, like people are comfortable doing things, especially because like Vue introduced a way that like really leveraged what we knew about HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in a way that like kind of made sense, and then like abstracted that away for us, so that we could still use what we knew and do some really powerful things with it. Now, Vue has matured to a framework where, I mean, it's basically one of the top 3 that's always mentioned in discussions. And so the real question here is that now that it's no longer like sort of the underdog and pushing the envelope on like sort of new innovations, it's not so much about like trying to rock the boat for the sake of rocking the boat, but there has to be discussions around like what is pushing the language forward and what can we do to make things even easier, even though now we're starting to depart a little bit from standard JavaScript. Because suddenly this here, right, like most people just won't recognize this. This is just not a thing that we learn. And so, for example, like for those who have been following frameworks, like Svelte is getting a lot of attention, and they're and for good reason too, right? There's a lot of things that are very interesting about it. They're pushing some new ideas, and so similarly, Vue wants to also think about ways it can further push the envelope and either get ahead of standards and figure out ways that things could be better rather than keeping us confined to what original JavaScript constraints are, right? Because if we always wait for JavaScript to do the right thing. I mean, frankly, let's think about jQuery. jQuery was an attempt to standardize on things that weren't native. And so it was kind of weird for people at first to do certain things. And so I would say that as you see these RFCs in the future, like try to keep an open mind when you're seeing them, because it might be a little bit foreign at first, but the real question is trying to figure out whether it not only has the right impact, but does it solve a problem that we're actually having as developers, rather than being something that, I don't know, call it that we're sort of used to seeing. Oh, this isn't standard. And so, just as you're thinking about these things, just something to consider. But it looks like, looks like there were some advancements on this that I wasn't aware of. Anyhow, okay, so for whatever reason, again, I forgot why the array in objects doesn't actually log the old one. I could have sworn the function was supposed to do the trick, but anyways, I don't want to hold this piece up. So let's eliminate our current count. Let's go back here. And so for our game, we know that we want, I'm going to use watch effect because I think it works a little bit more like kind of what we want. So again, this is sort of like watch all of the dependencies in here and then rerun the function when things change. So again, if state.userSequence.length is equal to 3, so the moment we have 3 items inside of here, I want you to go ahead and reset it. So state.userSequence equals empty array. I think this will work. I want to say color is not defined. Oh yeah, color options is, oh wait, no, that's right. Color current count. Oh yeah. Delete. Color is not defined. Yeah, that makes sense. I forgot. I have my terminal open. Need to hide that. Refresh. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. Great. It reset. This is good because what we want to do is this is the time we need to check against our correct sequence. So in this case, we're basically saying, so cons, again, correct sequence. We're not going to worry about like dynamic pieces of it yet. So let's say the magic sequence is blue, green, red. And so we're going to create a function that, again, doesn't need to be exposed. So check color sequence, and that's what we're going to do. And then there probably is a better way to do this, but I'm just going to do, so we're going to look at color options for each. No, I'd rather do it this way. And there's a reason why I think we should do it this way. Let I less than equal to state.userSequence.length. Yes. I plus. And the reason why I want to do this is because you could do like nested for loops or like for each, and then actually for each I think allows you to pull out the index, now that I think about it. But anyways, it's fine. This will work because what we're trying to do then is for each one, what we're going to try, we're going to say let status equals false. Okay. If user state.userSequence, right? If this item is equivalent to correct sequence, if it's equivalent to this item, then you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna this would be false. This is how we're gonna make it fancier later. False. If this sequence is correct, then I don't even need to do that. I don't need an if. You'll see why in a second. Because some of you may be getting ahead. Oh, I see Liga has a question. Let me respond to that in a second. Status.I is equal to this, which is cool because check color sequence is never assigned. I don't need it to. I need to actually do it here. Check color sequence here. Okay. One second. Let me look at Liga's question. When would you use watch and when watch effect? Yes. So like when it comes to watch versus watch effect, I think a lot of people will probably continue using watch because they're familiar with this $sign watch from Vue 2. But I think over time, I think we'll see watch effect grow in popularity because, as you'll notice, you don't have to really think about. I guess, okay, here's how I would time it. When you don't need to track whether it's an old or new variable, the values, if you don't need to compare the two, I think watch effect is actually a little bit cleaner from the sense of like if you're doing something that's pretty complex while watching certain dependencies, watch effect is nice because it kind of like groups everything together. But as we can see, like it's not as declarative though as like state.user sequence, again CV ov, like this has a very specific thing that like this is the data property I want to watch and then do this specific thing. So I think people will like this syntax for being like if we want to do very specific things on individual, like I don't know, state dot, what else do I have in here? Game status, right? Like there is an advantage to seeing what properties are being watched. So I think you'll still see it like this when you want to be very declarative. But when it's something like just generically watching it and then just like doing something, I think watch effect is a nicer sort of, I call it like, it's a little bit easier to reason with from like, it's sort of like being like, hey, watch this stuff in here. And then based on the stuff, then you're going to do this thing. So anyhow, cool. That said, we have check color sequence and all right. Let's see. What do I need to do? Oh, I need to get rid of current count. This doesn't exist anymore. Martin asked a question regarding whether I'm using Vite or Vue CLI. So yeah, this is a question before. So I played around with Vite, Martin. I've noticed that it does have some, call it bugs with some of the, like I've noticed like some of the plugins don't work exactly as expected. And so since Vite is still a little bit, it's still in development. And so as things are working out, because this is my Vue 3 lab, I do want to work with, I'm working with Vue CLI so I can actually test out things that people are using on a day-to-day. But I do have a Vite lab project that if people are looking to track, that is a thing. So yeah, so what I do is I try to actually keep track of my experiments. So if anyone's ever curious, like I have a React lab too, but here's my Vue 3 Vite lab as I'm like playing around with things and trying to see how things work and how easy it is. So, and also I think this is the reason why I think labs are great for those of us on GitHub is just because a lot of times we have experiments or we want to play around with something, and certainly you can use code sandbox and those sort of things, but I find it nice to have like a repo that's dedicated to it, and then I can just commit and control it a little bit differently. So that's just my personal preference. So yeah, like I hope that helps to answer your question. So yeah, watch effects is just like when you have something clean like this that you're just trying to do, like here I'm really just trying to check for watch effect equals 3, then I don't think as much is gained by being explicit here with that, but it certainly could be done. I think it'll become a matter of preference over time, but for those who have, or if you have React experience, then use effect is kind of the equivalent in the React world. Martin has what bugs did I encounter with Vite? Oh, I can't remember exactly. I want to say it was either a linting or some random thing that I ran into. So again, I do like Vite for its speed, but for most of the things I'm doing, I haven't needed that build speed that Evan talks a lot about in like for things. So for that reason, like I'm still working a lot with Vue CLI, but again, I'll probably do more content with Vite once I have a better understanding of it. So just something to keep in mind. You know, but now that I'm thinking about it though, status really shouldn't be here. I think I'm gonna say user sequence. Validation. I'll sequence. I don't know if I like that. Validation order. validation. I'm just gonna call it validation. Oh, okay. Track validation. All right, that's what I'm gonna do. False, false, false. Okay. So here, check color sequence, go through, and then we are gonna not update that. We are gonna update our state.track validation. And then that should be that. So just to make sure this works correctly, p track validation, false, false, false. So again, now if I click, what's the correct one? Blue, red. Okay, so that's false. So now if I click green again, that should, oh, interesting. Oh, this totally makes sense. Yes, okay. I was like, why is it not updating? We only check the color sequence once the series is 3. And once the series is 3, then state.user sequence dot length is equal to, oh, not length. Length, actually, you could do 0. I think that's another way to reset it. So again, 1, 2, 3. So false, 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 red, blue, green, false, blue, green, green, red, blue, green, red, true. And then theoretically now, this is where we might say watch, what did I call it? State.track validation. State.track validation, and then I basically say the current value, and then I say if if all 3 values are true, right? So I'm basically trying to say const game. I'm gonna call it results. Is equal to current value dot reduce, and then that's like the accumulator, which is going to be false. Oh, I just wanted to loop through and then just if it's whatever. How do I reduce all this? If all the values are true. Oh, I can do this. Current value dot find, and then if any value is equal to false, then result will always be, no, wait. Yes, hold up. Find, I think it's find index. Yes, so then, yeah, I'm gonna do it that way. Find index, if you can find that, it should be -1. So return result, log result. I think I'm gonna do log result. So if this works, watch is not defined. Oh, I broke. Okay, here we go. So what are we doing? 1, 2, 3. It's not watching. Why is it not watching? Watch state.track validation current value. Hello. Result is assigned but never has a value. That's fine. I'll hide you. Gosh, the ESLint is super getting in my way with prototyping. It's probably disable things. Okay, so that's interesting. It's not watching state.track validation in this case. And I think the reason for this is state.track validation hasn't, oh, that makes sense, because it hasn't been updated. So in this case, if I do green, 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 then we see hello. Yeah, so it hasn't changed. That's not great. So what we really want is, I take that back. I don't need to watch this at all. We only basically emit whether the game is won. This is where we'll end up today. Alex figured it out. Oh, okay. If you figured it out, let me know later. Yeah. Okay. So here we track true, true, true. So if basically state.track validation find index of false, basically if any false values exist, then don't worry about it. But otherwise, sorry, if it's equal to -1, which means none exists, then we are going to emit our event here, which is taken from our context argument, which I explained earlier is the second argument provided to setup. And context.emit. And the value being emitted is, I believe we called it minigame1. We did call it minigame1. Minigame1. That's it. So the way we test to see if this works is, so here, let me start the game. 4, 5, 6, 6, 2, 4. 4, 5, 6, 6, 2, 4. Submit. Great. And then here, we know the sequence should be blue, green, red. So if I do blue, green, red, that didn't do anything. Why? Error, probably error. False is not a function. Oh, whoops. Sorry. For every item is equal to false. Try that again. Again, we have 5, 3, 6, 7, 6, 1. I can't type. And then boom. And then again, the correct sequence is blue, green, red. Hey! And we got it. We have 2 mini games, but the mini games have shared features that certainly need to be refactored. But at least we have our 2 games. So in this, so let me go ahead and commit this. So so anyone following along, you will be able to find the prototype for the code. Although I can't promise it'll stay up forever, because sometimes I'll just I'll be experimenting with things. But at least you can track things, and I'll try to at least group them so that they're not completely blown away. But add mini game 2 with validate, or actually I already added mini game 2. Create validation for color match blocks. All right. Let's see. So we have a question from is there an advantage to using context.emit instead of destructuring it? So to answer your question, there is no, okay, actually there is an advantage in that for anyone who's not used to this idea of a context. So basically for people newer to frameworks, I think it's important. It does help to make it very declarative. That hey, by the way, setup receives a props and a context. So yeah, thanks, Alex. That's basically why. But again, I see so many library authors, they'll just automatically do this. And so I just want to make sure that people are always aware that. But yeah, there's no performance boosts or anything. That's a purely learning thing that I try to do in all the instructions, so that when you go out into the wild and see it, you'll be able to know where that's coming from and not go, oh, that looks like magic. It's not magic. It's just a context that is provided as a second argument. Okay, well, with that, this has been a lot of fun. So you'll be able to find me. So basically, the plan is for me to do this basically every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and so I'll try to make sure those are scheduled on the YouTube channel and announce it via Twitter and whatnot. If you have any ideas or things you want to work on together, I'm happy to accommodate that. So don't hesitate to drop ideas and hit me up if you have any questions. But thank you everyone for joining, and I guess until next time, signing off. Streamlabs.